Hello and welcome to Jessie Bear Book Club. As you know, I have been reading Maurice Druon's Accursed King series, and as I finished the Royal Succession, the fourth book in the series, I couldn't help noticing there were many similarities between this book and House of the Dragon, or the Dance of the Dragons, whatever you want to call the Targaryen Civil War. George R.R. Martin has already come out and said that A Game of Thrones was inspired by the Accursed King series. So, why wouldn't he lift some other bits for the earlier history of Westeros? As well as being inspired by the Accursed King series, I know that A Song of Ice and Fire was based on the Wars of the Roses, so I had always assumed the Dance of the Dragons was based on the war between Stephen and Matilda, but after reading The Royal Succession by Maurice Druon, I've changed my opinion, and what follows are my reasons why. I'm sure there's somebody out there yelling that the Accursed King series doesn't have dragons, but bear with me, I do have some points. Both stories have obviously bastard children born to unfaithful princesses, and the children have never formally been declared illegitimate. Even though the whole court knows about the scandal, they ignore it politely until the question of succession and inheritance is brought up. Then both narratives deal with the idea of a female ruler in a medieval world and how that goes against the grain. So there is the calling of a great council to decide whether women can inherit. In Maurice Druon's Royal Succession, the Great Council is called and conclude that women cannot inherit, and that no one can inherit through the female line, just like in House of the Dragon with Rhaenys, the queen who never was. In both these stories, there are rival factions within one family. It doesn't matter whether you call them Valois and Poitras or Green and Blacks, they are struggling for power after the death of a long-lived king. Both stories also involve pregnant queens when kings die. We have Rhaenyra when her father dies, pregnant with her baby girl, and we have Queen Clemence, pregnant with her son, when her husband Louis the Hutin dies. Both these babies don't make it, and the labors are long and hard, delaying people's actions and letting other factions grab power. Now we move on to the murder of children. We have a newborn baby poisoned and a child murdered within a secure home environment by a close family member. In A Royal Succession, we have King John the Posthumous poisoned by his godmother at his own baptism. And doesn't that seem remarkably similar to Blood and Cheese, who were hired by Prince Daemon to murder one of Queen Helena's children when she was about to put them to bed? Both these actions are, of course, horrific, but they were done secretly, and I think that lends credence to my theory that House of the Dragon is based on A Royal Succession. There is also the end of the book and the open opposition of Philip the Long at his coronation by his aunt because he has excluded women from the line of succession. Doesn't that just scream House of the Dragon to you? Especially the bit where Rhaenys, the queen who never was, bursts out of the ground in the dragon pit, disrupting the coronation of Aegon II. But what do you think? I think I've stumbled upon something of great significance. George R. R. Martin has been lifting many scenes from Maurice Druon throughout his career within the world of Westeros. But what do you think? Leave me a comment. And if you... Hello and welcome to Jessie Bear Book Club. Today we are discussing how Rhaenyra Targaryen is based on Queen Isabella, the She-Wolf of France, Queen of England and wife of Edward II. This video is part of a series I am doing that covers the Accursed King series and comparisons between those characters and the characters that George R. R. Martin created, because he cherry-picked a lot of people. Without further ado, let's get on with this comparison. Both women were married young to gay husbands who had no interest in them physically. Rhaenyra, of course, was married to Laenor Velaryon, who had favourites like Sir Joffrey Longmouth and Sir Carl Corrys, and Isabella's husband, Edward II, kept favourites who are infamous, Piers Gaveston and Hugh Despenser. Both these men kept their favourites and lovers close, showering them with gifts. It is also important to note that all these favourites died violently. Rhaenyra and Isabella are also both notable because they were high-ranking women of royal blood who had extramarital affairs, something completely unheard of. It also came back to bite them both in the ass later in life. Rhaenyra took Criston Cole and Harwin Strong to bed, if you go by the show, and Isabella, famously and notoriously the most adulterous Queen of England, went to war against her husband Edward II with her lover Roger Mortimer. Both women were only daughters of powerful kings. Isabella's father was Philip the Fair, and of course Rhaenyra's father was Viserys. Both these men spoiled their favourite children, and if you need any evidence of this, simply look at both these women's tastes in clothes and jewellery. Isabella's marriage trousseau was enormous, and Rhaenyra is well known for loving extravagant clothes even as her body decayed after multiple births. Rhaenyra and Isabella also led powerful court factions, of which they were the figureheads. Rhaenyra, of course, leads the Blacks, and Isabella became the leader of the faction at the English court that deposed King Edward II and his favourite Hugh Despenser. Rhaenyra and Isabella's lovers were also both murdered by members of their close family. Rhaenyra's lover and the father of her sons, Harwin Strong, died in a fire at Harrenhal, with it also killing his father, Lord Lionel Strong. The fire was said to be an accident and blamed on the curse of Harrenhal, but other non-mysticals suspected Prince Daemon Targaryen, whose motives would have been eliminating a rival for the princess's affection. When it comes to Queen Isabella's lover, Roger Mortimer, he was executed for high treason by Isabella's oldest son, Edward III, and though there were many reasons for Lord Mortimer to be executed, the main reason was never spoken aloud: the fact that Roger Mortimer had despoiled the Queen, the King's mother. Their similarities only become stronger when you realise both women were rumoured to have been involved in their husbands' murders. Laenor Velaryon was slain by his friend and lover, Sir Carl, but rumours persist. Sir Carl killed Laenor on behalf of Prince Daemon Targaryen, and we know from the show Daemon and Rhaenyra staged Laenor's death, so in that instance, of course there would be rumours. Whereas in the real world, after his deposition, Edward II was widely believed to have died violently at Berkeley Castle. Rumours suggest at the hands of the newly established regime of his wife, Queen Isabella, and her lover, Roger Mortimer. The old king's mere existence created hope of a reinstatement of his power, which threatened Isabella and Mortimer. They had to put an end to that. Both women were more successful dynastically than personally. Their sons became kings, establishing dynasties that carried their blood and DNA into the future. So I have now made 9 points that Rhaenyra and Isabella have a lot in common. I know there are going to be some naysayers out there that say this comparison is untrue because Rhaenyra Targaryen is based on the Empress Matilda, and to them I say, look a little closer at the final details. George R. R. Martin definitely drew some inspiration from the Empress Matilda, the main bit being her giving birth as her father lies dying, and that keeping her from claiming her crown straight away. That is a straight copy and paste job, I am not disputing that. But Apart from that little fact, and George R. R. Martin decided to make sure Rhaenyra was never officially crowned queen, something else the Empress Matilda never managed to do, the rest of her story is very closely based on Isabella, the she-wolf of France, Queen of England. Before Isabella took her lover and set herself up against her husband, she was the focus for civil war breaking out when she was refused entry to Leeds Castle, where she was fired upon by archers. This could be related to Rhaenyra's end of rule in King's Landing, when she is under siege in the Red Keep from a mob of citizens. The roles are simply reversed, and one must remember that while Isabella and Mortimer ruled in London, their policies were incredibly unpopular. That was one of the reasons why Edward III found it so easy to topple their government when he came of age. George R. R. Martin also took inspiration from Queen Isabella's story for Queen Alicent later in life, as obviously Rhaenyra is eaten by a dragon, and that can't happen in real life, unfortunately. Alicent and Queen Isabella lived out the end of their days in obscurity, with rumours circulating that both had gone mad. But what do you think? Do you agree with me that this is just another one of George R. R. Martin's cherry-picking incidences from the Accursed King series? I feel I've made my point, but what do you think? Do you think that Rhaenyra is closer to the Empress Matilda, or agree with me that she is closer to Isabella the She-Wolf of France? Leave me a comment with your thoughts below, and like this video because it's the only way the horrible dynastic YouTube algorithm notices me. Hello and welcome to Jessie Book Club. Today we are discussing how Prince Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince, is based on Charles of Valois, from the Accursed King series of books by Maurice Druon. Before we start this video, you can go back and watch some of my Accursed King series reviews. I'm covering all the books, and I'm doing comparisons between A Song of Ice and Fire characters and the characters in the Accursed King series. There will be spoilers ahead, so tread carefully. Both Daemon and Charles are younger brothers of reigning monarchs who are hungry for their own crown. Daemon, of course, is the younger brother of Viserys I, and Charles of Valois is the younger brother of Philip the Fair. Both men try to claim crowns from other places in their worlds, but never openly rebel against their brothers who are king. Daemon holds the title Prince of the City, Rogue Prince, King of the Stepstones and Narrow Sea, and Charles of Valois claims the title King of Aragon and Emperor of Constantinople through marriage, as well as repeatedly trying to become Holy Roman Emperor. However, despite wanting their own power, both men always remain to some extent on good terms with their brothers, the king, never fully gaining a crown in their own right. My third point on Daemon and Charles' similarities is quite good. They were both married 3 times. Daemon's first wife was Lady Rhea Royce, his second wife was Laena Velaryon, and his third wife was Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen. All 3 gave him power and influence to some different degree, even if he didn't like his bronze bitch. Charles of Valois' marital career follows a similar trajectory. Margaret of Naples was his first wife. Catherine I, Latin Empress of Constantinople, was his second and most beloved wife, and his third wife was Maud Chatillon. And I would argue that both men loved their second wives the best. Daemon loved Lady Laena Velaryon, and Charles adored and was buried beside Catherine I, Latin Empress of Constantinople. Also, even though these 2 men were never king in their own right of their homeland, their sons became king after their deaths. Daemon's sons were kings in turn. We have Aegon III Targaryen and Viserys II, who became king after Aegon II's death, and Charles of Valois' son became Philip VI of France shortly after his father's death. Both men were also competent military commanders who led successful expeditions in warfare in their own names. Daemon claimed back the Stepstones for Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms, and Charles of Valois claimed back much of Aquitaine from the English for his king. Point number 6. Both men openly argued with their brother the king's right-hand man. Charles of Valois disagreed many times openly with his brother Philip the Fair's main advisor, Marigny, and after Philip the Fair's death, he brought about the downfall of Marigny, having him publicly executed by hanging. Daemon Targaryen openly fought with Otto Hightower, the king's hand, so many times that he was excluded from the king's council later in Viserys' reign. After Viserys' death, Otto was the first person to be beheaded as a traitor by Rhaenyra, Daemon's wife, after the fall of King's Landing in 130 AC, and I can't imagine Daemon would have been overly annoyed at his arch-rival's execution. Time for similarity number 7. Let's talk about daughters. Of course, Daemon Targaryen only had 2 daughters, Baela and Rhaena, whereas Charles of Valois had 9, but it's more about who they married and how important they were for future dynastic matters. Charles of Valois could be called the great-grandfather of Europe. His grandchildren were so many and married so often, and this same title could be granted to Daemon, great-grandfather of Westeros. His daughter Rhaena had 6 girls, and these men's genes were important dynastically for years to come. As it has to be remembered, all these girls married extremely well, whether in the world of Westeros or in medieval France. Both House Valerian and House Tyrell in A Song of Ice and Fire at present can trace their lineages back to Daemon, the Rogue Prince. That is all I have for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to give it a like if you like this sort of content. You can also leave me a comment if you think I'm right or not about this character snatching George R. Martin is going about. You can also subscribe because I have lots of other videos comparing the Accursed King series to A Song of Ice and Fire. George R. Martin wrote the foreword for the modern Accursed King series of books, where he says that the Accursed King series was the original A Song of Ice and Fire, and I have noticed that even though George R. R. Martin's writing style is that of a gardener, he does like to pluck plump fruit characters from other authors, especially rather unknown French authors from the 1950s. Until next time, winter is coming.